I was really conscious of the impression that he would have of me. I wasn't just sat on the end of the phone. I started to go out and do audits and visits.
Did
But there
you
was nothing in
prompt
place.
that?
There was nothing in place, so I
So
created
you
the
started-
systems,
Brilliant.
the documents, the processes.
Yeah. You had
Again,
a big team, had you?
big team. I mean,
Yeah.
I was managing in Pencoth as well. I
Yeah.
had a few people, but I ended up with I think 13 or 14 people when I left the college, starting off with 3 people. Hi, welcome to the Great in You podcast from the Great Schools Trust. My name's Stephen Panter. I'm usually your host, but obviously, as you saw in part 1, it was me being spoken to by a good friend of mine, Folan. We didn't quite have enough time in that first episode, so we've gone into part 2. So that's what we're doing today, and obviously following on from that in the coming weeks, I'm going to be speaking with some fantastic guests. But yeah, part 2.
Part 2, here we go.
Welcome back.
Welcome you as well, Steve.
Yeah.
We had so much to get through, hadn't we, in that
We
first
did.
one? So
Yeah.
I think I'm so glad that we were able to have this time
Yeah.
to explore this, because there was no way we were going to rush through the second part.
Yeah.
Your life is incredible. Your story is incredible, and it deserves that time
Yeah.
to honour the journey that you've been on.
Yeah.
Because what we're going to find out today is where you went from, because what we'd found, just for a quick recap, if people haven't followed the first one, if you haven't, subscribe and get episode 1. But
Yeah.
your childhood, you were in care.
Yeah.
You had your arm broken at 3.
I did.
Am I right?
Yeah.
And you were removed from your birth mum and
Yeah.
stepdad,
Yeah.
who was the perpetrator.
Yeah, around the age of kind of 3.5, 4, that kind of age.
And your life in foster care and then later adoption
Yeah.
was very checkered, wasn't very
Yeah.
happy.
No, it was a challenge, and I think we
Yeah.
spoke last time about not really feeling connected,
Yeah.
not feeling part of that, and obviously some identity issues, and, like looking at, obviously, when I was a kid, I used to look at the colour of my skin and, the people that were around
Right.
me, and you felt kind of a little bit different to everybody else.
And this was in the 80s.
This was in the 80s, yeah.
So culturally, there was a lot
Yeah.
going on at that time.
Yeah.
That would have
Yeah.
impacted you as well with the dominant ideology in society.
Yeah. I think we spoke as well last time about, I have kind of used that to my advantage as well as I've got older.
Well, we can talk more about that
Yeah.
now, moving forward, because
Yeah,
Yeah.
and having a foot in each camp and not really knowing where I fit, but then becoming more and more comfortable with that as well as I've got older.
So I think, just so that we've just done a bit of a recap there, but let's move on. You were made homeless.
Yeah,
You landed on your feet.
Yeah.
You seem to me that you're a pretty resilient person.
Yeah.
Because you get knocked back and bounced back all the time from whatever
Yeah.
knockback you've had.
Yeah, I think last time obviously we spoke about travel
Yeah.
as well, and how I always felt that I wanted to get away, and I think people around me kind of must have had that feeling at the time as well.
Yeah.
He doesn't really want to be here. He constantly, I went to Bournemouth and Newquay, and
Yeah.
then went to America, went to Ireland, then went to Australia.
Yeah.
And I think that travelling really kind of opened up my eyes.
And so we find you now.
Yeah,
In Middlesbrough, isn't it? That's where we left off.
that's
Is
where we
that-
left off. Yeah,
And how did you get then? Which I'd love to know, because
Yeah.
you're here now.
yeah,
You're in Liverpool.
Yes.
You came from there to here. So if you can talk us through, how did you get from Middlesbrough
yeah.
to land here and become an honorary Scouser like myself?
Yeah, 20 plus years now.
I know,
Yeah.
same as
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, my friends from Yorkshire say I've got a little bit of a twang.
Bit of a twang.
Yeah, a bit of a twang. But yeah, I was up there doing a foundation degree. Durham University said to me, you've got your GCSE, but you need some kind of A-levels or equivalent. So they said, do this course,
Right.
and then you can then go on to do a degree. So I did this fantastic course. I touched on it last time. It was kind of sociology, anthropology, adaptation to the environment. So, psychology as well.
And I think that is brilliant from having come from travelling as well.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
you've already opened your eyes and exposed yourself
Yeah.
to different ways of being. That's brilliant.
And I
to
think
give you
it's
theory.
understanding kind of sociology, I think, is really important. Understanding social structures and society, and how that affects, your area, the way the brain works, and the psychology of a person. I think it was just a really interesting course, and it was something that I did in a year. passed it again successfully. I was starting to learn how to study as well, and I was always one of those people that would speak to tutors.
Brilliant.
You know,
Asking for more support.
And I think that was because I was older as well. I was a little bit older. I was 24, 25 around that time.
Right.
So I was confident enough to go to tutors and talk about what it is that they were looking for in assignments and stuff like that. You know, kind of knowing how to get to where I wanted to get with communication. And obviously, I would say, you know, we've spoken about some kind of female role models. I think there was one or two in the college that I kind of went to and looked up to. I was at Durham University. And I think I learned quite quickly to communicate. You know, if you're not sure, if you don't, you know, if you... At the end of the day, they want you to pass the degree. You want to pass it. There's sometimes some, maybe a lack of confidence. Am I doing the right thing? Am I going in the right direction? You know, am I delivering what they want me to deliver? But I was always very good at speaking to them about that.
Yeah.
You know, and I took that through to when I did my degree as well. So yeah, I had a fantastic year in Middlesbrough. Met some really good friends that I'm still friends with now. You know, Graham and Lorraine, you know, stick out the most. Still friends with them now, still in touch. Did this degree, and it was coming to the end, the foundation degree. It was coming to the end of that, and I was starting to apply for university, you know, for the university. And Durham were kind of saying to me, "Oh, well, you know," it was almost like they'd made a promise, but they were kind of backtracking on it a little bit.
How do you mean they made a promise? Like,
Yeah,
after this foundation degree, you can carry on and do the next level.
Yeah, but when I applied, I thought that I wanted to be a teacher, and I thought, well, what subject would be interesting to learn? And I thought history would be quite interesting. Not that I've ever been a historian, but I just, probably in hindsight, it was probably me not thinking about it enough and not knowing enough what I wanted to do. So I went and applied for a history and education course. It was at Durham University, and I got knocked back, or there were sounds being made that, you know, you're not going to get on this course. Maybe look at something else. So I thought, well, I'm not going to wait for that decision to come and then be left with nothing. So I knew that I needed to apply to other universities. So applied to Leicester, De Montfort University, and I always joke and I say Oxford and Cambridge were calling and stuff like that, but they weren't. But I applied for 5 or 6 universities around the country. Yeah. And I got accepted by them all, actually. I think it's because I was a mature student and I'd got some good grades. I got a foundation from Durham. But I chose Liverpool, actually. I went to Liverpool Hope, and they were the first university that responded to me. But then all my life, I've always supported Liverpool.
Yeah, so this is what you think brought you here?
Yeah,
the football team?
Yeah, I did think about Leicester at some point, but then, it was the football, yeah.
Do you know what? I think there's a lot of people like that who've been attracted to this town. Because my children's dad was the same. Yeah. He came here to study because of LFC.
No, I think...
It's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I think there's a lot of people do that, but I've always supported Liverpool all my life. And but yeah, I came for that, really. And then, in 2004, September, I arrived in Liverpool, and I was about 25 at the time. And, you know, I didn't look for a flat. I wanted the whole immersive university experience. So I stayed in halls for my first year, yeah. That's where I met my son's mum, actually, in university. She was like a hall tutor. She was doing a PGCE. Yeah. So that's when, you know, that's obviously, you know, how my son, you know, came to be.
So that was 21 years ago, wasn't it now?
Yeah, 21 years ago.
How did you fund that? Did you have to take a loan out?
Yeah, all of that stuff.
So, but you were just doing it. You were just going for it because I mean, you're coming from nothing, basically.
Well, yeah.
And that sometimes is a huge barrier.
Of course it is.
Especially for a lot of students that we work with. Yeah. That we encounter.
Absolutely.
You know, and it was for me as well. Yeah. And I had to do similar. Yeah. You know, working class kids. Yeah. You know, you don't necessarily get the handouts.
And do you know what? I remember the University of Durham talking about that and talking about next steps, and they were saying that, you know, if somebody does a degree, they're likely to earn like a X amount more over their lifetime. I think it's something ridiculous, like 500,000 or something like that, if it's in a career that your degree's in, than you would if you didn't do a degree. So for me, I was on that path now. I thought about it a lot when I was in Australia. I'd met people that had been doing degrees, and I'd told little white lies that I was doing a degree as well. Yeah. So for me, it was a path, and it was like it was almost like a distraction as well. I was really down when I came back from Australia, and I was like, but I'd kind of promised myself that that's what I was going to do. Yeah, I was going to go and do a degree. I love it. And like I say, I didn't have parents pushing me. No. I didn't have I didn't have parents financially supporting me.
No.
You know, so I had to go down the route of, you know, student loans and, you know.
And I bet you found that there were a lot of people that you were, like your peers, a lot of your peers had all of those things.
Yeah.
And it makes a big difference, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You know, for the comfort levels. And
Yeah.
so I think that shows even more resilience
Yeah,
for you.
no, it
makes
does.
you more determined
Yeah.
that
No,
you're
it
going to
does.
achieve.
Yeah, it does. And I think and obviously going into a degree when you're 25, 26, you know a little bit more about yourself. I mean, for those that do it when they're 18, fantastic. But I just felt for me personally, because of my journey in education, I didn't really start it until I was like 23, really.
But I love that because it just shows that there is no age limit as well.
No.
We know that on the continent, that's how they do it anyway. In Germany and Holland and Scandinavia, they do that a lot.
Absolutely, and I'm a real advocate for that,
Yeah.
and I think that we are always, you know, we're always learning.
Yeah.
Education doesn't stop. No
Every
matter
day
what
is a
age you
school
are.
day, as many people say.
No,
yeah,
they do.
it's true,
they
isn't
do.
it?
Every day is a school day, and you know, but I was determined. That was the other thing. And what's funny actually, the first year of my degree, I did history and education studies, and when I was kind of studying history, I found quite quickly it wasn't for me. So rather than kind of give up and go and get a job, I finished the first year. Well, I didn't finish the first year actually. I didn't complete it. So I started again. So I did an extra year of university.
Yeah.
So I had an interest in kind of disability and things like that, and so I did disability with sports studies.
Okay.
I thought maybe I could be a PE teacher, or maybe I could go into kind of supporting people and things like that. So I went into disability, special needs disability with sports.
It seems that you have always wanted to, you know, once you've started to learn.
Yeah.
It seems to me that there's this urge to give back.
Yeah.
To reach out, because I mean, you could have done any discipline.
Yeah, supporting people.
Why one way you're front facing, working with people?
Yeah, I think supporting people, I think has been something I've done for the last 20 years at least. You know, probably slightly longer, 25 years. And I've always wanted to kind of, like you say, give back in some way. You know, wasn't necessarily in safeguarding at the time. It was with people with disabilities. So when I was studying my first year at Liverpool Hub, I worked in that area. You know, I worked with people with schizophrenia. I worked with people with support needs, adults and children as well. Worked in children's homes. I wanted to get that kind of experience of supporting people.
Yeah.
And what I wanted to do is I knew that when I was at university, the way that you would get ahead is not just with a degree alone, but it was with the work experience as well. You know,
clever.
And as we touched on before, I always had that work ethic.
Yeah.
I always knew that, you know, nothing's given to you. You know, even at university, I was doing 30 hours a week.
Wow.
You know, and studying as well.
Yeah. So 30 hours of work.
Yeah.
Like
well
outside.
the
that was paid work. That
paid
was
work,
enabling
weekends,
you to,
evenings.
Yeah.
You know, that type of thing.
Around your lectures.
Yeah.
Which is difficult because your peers, again, a lot of your peers would be doing their, you know, whatever standard lectures and then going home or partying. Or Did you have a chance to experience the social element?
Yeah, I mean, the first few months I was in halls for 6 months, 6 to 8 months maybe. So I, you know, I was the oldest one in my hall.
Yeah.
I was kind
they
of the
didn't call
senior.
you granddad or anything, did
the
they?
senior student I was called. But all the you know, the people that were in there were a few years younger than me. They used to call me the guru.
Oh, the guru. Yeah.
So
I love that.
You know, I was obviously a bit more wiser. You know, travelled.
That's lovely. But you had that kind of ability to support people even at that stage.
And I did a lot of that actually. There was a lot of that in the halls, you know, a lot of people that needed, but I partied as well, you know. I've always had that in me where I've loved going out. I love, so it's the social aspect that I love. But that starting to figure out actually that I was somebody that could support people, you know. I suppose that was the early stages of that, the foundations really. But no, I had a great time, and like I said, that's where I met my son's mum. We were together for 5 years. We had Daniel we had him in the final year of my degree, and I think what happened is I did really well. I was quite studious, you know, knew what the tutors wanted. I had a really good team of tutors as well, and you know, the course leaders, Laura in particular was fantastic, and just really supportive. I think she was probably my kind of, you know, that female figure as well.
That mother figure.
Yeah. And and Shirley as well was fantastic. They were really nurturing as a group of tutors and very accessible. So it wasn't a university where you nobody was available. You had to book appointments in. You could just rock up and speak to them and see them. And, you know, I had my ups and downs in my course, but the final year I just remember being really focused when Daniel came along, who was my son.
It's just that extra incentive, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's like,
I was straight A's across the board in the final year.
Well done, yeah.
You know, and I was probably teetering on a 2-1.
Yeah.
But because of that, because of that focus in that final year, I ended up getting a first class degree.
Fantastic, yeah.
And I always remember I was supporting a gentleman actually with schizophrenia, and I had to go back to the flat that we were living in, and I got my results in the post.
Yeah.
And I remember being with him at the time. This guy was his support worker, and he was in the car and went to the post box in the flat and opened up this thing, and I saw first class degree, and I remember being quite emotional. And,
you would be.
You know, because it's like that was kind of validation, wasn't it?
That is such validation, Steve. And it's just such a hard thing to get as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
To get that first is
and I was
damn hard work. So congratulations.
Yeah, thanks.
And you should still be celebrating it today. I think it is a massive achievement.
Yeah, I think when we went to the what do you call it when you go for your graduation?
Oh, for your graduation, yeah.
It was, you had a little kind of star by your name, you know, like on the thing, and I remember feeling like really proud. And it's funny though, at the time I was reflecting back on my schooling. You know, and kind of what some of the things that were said to me when I was at school, or, you know, if you carry on like this, you won't achieve anything. And, you know, it was the first real point, the highest point that I'd been, if you like, from an education point of view. And I was like, you know,
this couldn't go any higher.
No,
you can't go any higher.
No. But I was quite clever as well with my degree choices and stuff like that. I never really had to take lots of exams. It was all about expressing myself and writing and, you know, like, you know, understanding what others had written about a subject and things like that. You know, I was quite savvy in the way that I kind of
playing up to
navigated that situation. And but yeah, I mean, obviously becoming a dad as well around this, you know, the same within that year, you know, becoming a dad and all those kind of emotions that came up, you know, of being a dad as well, and spending years actually thinking about, well, what am I going to be like when I'm going to be a dad? I'm going to be different. I'm going to be this. I'm going to be that.
So you'd already been thinking about that prior to having the baby.
Yeah, because I think as you get older,
the baby, in
as
your
you get
20s,
older, you do.
That
start
was something
to think,
you were reflecting on.
Yeah, what am I going to be? You know, the fear of that as well, as every parent goes through. What am I going to be like when I'm a dad? And you put a lot of pressure on yourself when you come from my kind of background, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to shift and change your experience into something better for your children.
You're breaking a cycle of generational trauma, really.
Of course you are, yeah.
Because it's probably come from, you know, not just for you, but your mum and her parents and beyond.
And I think really, as I reflect on it, as I've got older, I think I probably struggled with it initially of being a dad, you know, and obviously me and his mum, after a couple of years, we split up, and you know, but the most important thing to me, you know, in that scenario was obviously we'd split up. We spent kind of 5 years together, and it didn't work out, and you know, that kind of, you know, the details of that, you know, I wouldn't really speak about kind of publicly. It wasn't, you know, neither of us had gone off with anybody or anything like that. It's just, you know, we perhaps just weren't
the way it evolved.
for
That's
each other.
what happens sometimes.
Yeah. But what was really important to me in that is that I still had that relationship.
Yeah.
And I think at that time I did give myself a hard time that had happened, and you know, and I, you know, and I didn't, you know, obviously I didn't want that to happen for him. But I think I knew early on what I needed to do. You know, my time that I had with him was it wasn't an awful split in the sense that I wasn't not allowed to see him and things like that. You know, I always had that contact. I saw him when I should have him. You know, I always paid, you know, the money and things like that. His impression of me, and I thought about this, it was one of the most kind of, I suppose from a maturity point of view at that age, I mean, I was kind of 32 anyway. I was really conscious of the impression that he would have of me. Both, I mean, at 2 years old, he's not going to, obviously he's going to have a positive relationship with me.
But the security's there, the continuity's there, and at 2 years old that would impact.
But what he would also think of me in the future as well.
Yeah, so the role model.
The role model, to me that was really important.
That you didn't have.
That I never had, you know, maybe that's why I struggled with it in those initial stages. I don't know.
Well, it was a lot of pressure that you put on yourself.
Yeah.
Because clearly that was the be all and end all for you.
Yeah.
Was, you know, you've got the degree, you've done so well.
Yeah.
And this, you know, family unit that you didn't have.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you can
And then
imagine
that kind of
if you
broke
look back
down
on
then
yourself.
shortly after that. It wasn't long after that, really. Probably maybe about maybe a year after me finishing university.
Yeah.
Around that time, so.
But it's also a very difficult time when you have a new baby.
Yeah,
for any
of course
couple,
it is. Yeah,
for any foundation.
Of course it is. Yeah.
So
yeah.
it's good to maybe look back with compassion.
Yeah,
on
of
yourself.
course. Yeah, yeah, and I think, you know, I look at my son now, and you know, how well he's doing, and you know, I don't think that without me and his mum both giving him that. Yes, we weren't together, but we both made sure that we gave him, you know, everything that he needed.
And the stability.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be you kind of, you know, 2.4
this
children.
Is it. That's just what I was saying. Yeah.
You know, it doesn't, and I think you come to terms with that as you get a bit older. But there's always a little bit of guilt, really, that happened. But you know, it wasn't to do with anything to do with anybody else or anything like that. So, but we, you know, we get on now, and you know. Obviously, I'm in a new relationship now.
Yeah.
And you know, that's amazing. I'm married, and
that's relatively new as well, isn't it?
well, we've been together for 10 years.
Okay, so because you got married last year.
We got married 2 or 3 years ago.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I'll come back to that family now kind of situation. But yeah, leaving university was, you know, and it was a real like a sense of achievement. You know, and I was really happy about that and really content. And it's almost like a nobody thought you could do it kind of thing. And it was proving that to myself and proving that. But I think leading up to that, I'd been proving things to myself all the way along, you know. Yeah. You know, you don't just get given a first. No. It's like you've got to do the assignments, you've got to do. And a lot of that was down to the support that I was getting.
Well, I call it ABC.
Yeah.
So it's when I'm working with clients, I say, like, you can make a commitment. It actually isn't that hard to make a commitment to say, I'm going to get a first or I'm going to get my degree. But the ABC is action brings commitment.
Yes.
You've got to act into that commitment. You've got to live into that commitment. And that's what you did every single day. The more you're showing up for yourself, the more that's feeding back to you.
Yeah.
And we said that before in the other podcast. There's your self-efficacy at work.
Yeah.
And with your self-efficacy grows your self-esteem.
Yeah, of course.
And your self-worth.
Yeah.
But for you especially, that is significant because coming from a place where you could have had absolutely no self-esteem. Yeah. Given the start in life that you received.
Yeah. And I think we've discussed this before, haven't we? You almost kind of, you forget in some ways that that's you.
Yeah.
That's what you've experienced because you're moving further and further away from it. You forget that was your childhood and that's what you experienced.
And that's normal. That's called fading affect bias.
Yes.
Because the more further away...
I like the technical parts
good,
that you drop in.
But it is so true.
Yeah.
Because sometimes with fading affect bias, you forget the bad stuff and you end up going back to the bad situation.
Yeah.
Because I do work with a lot of people in addiction and that's how you end up going back into it or going back into the bad habit or getting, you know, if you're working with a child who's finding it hard because they procrastinate and then they start working and then they slip back. So to accept that sometimes happens. Yeah. But thankfully, your fading affect bias keeps you driving forward.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. And
it can be a force of good as well.
Yeah, no, it can. And that's what it's interesting that they were my foundations and I started to support people. And that was something that drove me as well, you know, that I got something from that. You know, I got some, again, maybe some validation, maybe giving what, in a way, without giving it directly about what I'd experienced, maybe it was my way of kind of dealing with things and coping with things. Never, although I'm happy to have money, but it doesn't drive me in a sense that, you know, it doesn't drive me. I know I'm never going to be a millionaire, you know, I know, but to me, supporting people is something that I enjoy doing. And as you get older, you get better at it, don't you?
You do, you get better. But you started off. So when you came out, did you go into education straight away then?
No. I got a job in Warrington. So I got a job because I've been supporting people. I got a job in the social care team, as a community support worker.
Right.
So I worked with the child protection social workers.
So what does that look like? What would an average day be like for you at that stage?
So it would be, so that was kind of July 2009. That's when I graduated, and I applied for jobs quite quickly. I was even applying before I graduated. I knew I was, savvy enough to know I need to get into work. And so a day. What was interesting for me was it was almost kind of that full circle, and I'd gone back almost to I would have been one of these children that I was working with.
My goodness.
So it was child protection social work. So it was dealing with children that were on child protection plans, child in need plans, children that were being removed, supervising contacts, watching social workers walk into offices with babies that they've had to remove and things like that.
Literally into the office straight from.
I remember being a little bit, I wouldn't say emotionally triggered. I wasn't upset. But I remember a realisation that, watching kids come into offices without the parents that had to be removed for their own safety and their own well-being. I was one. That was me. 30 years ago, or however many it was. So that was. But then I think I went into that potentially for that reason, almost feeling.
Had you not thought that through?
Not really. No.
Were you just randomly applying for every job that was out there, and suddenly you get this?
And suddenly I'm in there, and
you're like, whoa.
Yeah, and what was weird was I was only there for a few months. And what I was trying to do initially is get a job that was related to working with children. Mm-hmm. That's what I wanted to do. This came up and I applied for it. But it was good. I met one of my good friends, Ollie, actually. I'm still friends with him. Met him in the first few weeks. But knew quite quickly it wasn't for me. And it wasn't related to my degree either. My degree was in disability and special needs. Yeah. And I had part of that was sports as well. So I wanted to work in something in that area, but wasn't quite sure really what I wanted to do. Thought about doing a PGC and stuff like that, but then really thought to myself, during my degree, I don't really feel like I want to be a teacher. But then when I went into that team, I felt I don't really want to be a social worker.
Good. Well, you're getting some experience and you're getting some insight as well. Yeah.
So a job came up actually in Warrington, in Warrington Council, which is who I was working for. I was only there for a few months in the social work team, and it wasn't really for me. I didn't really. There were some good people there, but I didn't really. It just wasn't my cup of tea. It wasn't taxing enough. I was doing a lot of the kind of,
the bureaucratic.
The role is to support social workers and what they needed. When I just thought that I wanted to be a bit more autonomous and a bit more. I wanted to, lead on things myself a little bit. And obviously, I'm not a qualified social worker, so I wasn't expecting to lead on things with them. But so anyway, a job came up as an inclusion practitioner. So so that was basically supporting, advising, being the lead professional for families with children with disabilities. So it was that lead professional role, family support meetings.
So like an advocate for them.
Yeah. I mean, quite, it was where they didn't meet the criteria to have a social worker. So it was that kind of level 2, level 3, support. So I was their go-to person, their lead professional. So I had about 40 cases. So being that go-to person, that lead professional that would advocate for them in meetings, would be that person that would kind of, challenge them when they needed it, or maybe refer to other services, or be an advocate for them, or lots of different elements to that role, really. But I had 40 different families with 40 different situations and scenarios.
Very complex, I'd imagine.
Yeah. What attracted me to the role, actually, in my dissertation, is I did it on autism and the impact of the family, the impact autism has on the family, and especially siblings. So I'd written a whole dissertation on this, done loads of research, but I was in that situation now, working with families.
Living it.
So, I'm thinking back, you're not sure of what detail you think about things, are you, and how you navigate things, but I'm sure that, because I did some research with a family as well, so I'm sure somehow that kind of attracted me to that kind of role. Yeah. And I went into this, this amazing inclusion team. It was like, there must have been 70 people in the team at the time. And it's split into 4 different areas of Warrington. Had a great team, Kath and Christine and the team. And again, there were lots of kind of mother figures. Yeah. I was the younger person. I was the youngest in the, there's 1 or 2 that were taken on. But I was also taken on because I was male as well.
Yeah.
And doing that role, and that never bothered me. I never thought it was, there was never one of these that thought, this is a role for females or anything like that. I just really enjoyed working with the families, but I was kind of looked after and nurtured in that team. And then I did that for 2.5 years, I had parents coming to me with ideas, and I was always a kind of why not kind of a person.
Good.
You know,
I
I
like
remember
that.
a mum coming to me about this idea that she had to take her son with autism to this club in Manchester. She lived in Warrington, this Lego club. And why didn't we have anything like that in Warrington? So I said, well, why not? Let's set it up.
Great. Initiative.
Yeah.
Great.
So I got like a commendation from the head of service.
Did
'cause
you?
I set up this club, and it was all these families started coming to it, and I was getting more funding and stuff like that.
But look at the value you're adding
yeah,
to that community
Yeah.
and to their lives.
yes, yeah,
Look at the joy you're bringing
yeah,
to that small family unit.
yeah.
Because it's hard.
Oh, it is,
It's hard to
yeah,
be in that
yeah.
situation.
And
Really difficult.
that kind of created that attitude, and I think I've still got that now. And you know, that kind of why not?
Love it.
Don't-
It's a
you
can
don't-
do.
You don't have to stay in your lane. You know, put yourself in out of your comfort zone. You know, ask for things where some people might not ask for them.
Yeah.
You know, I've had that. You know, I think you're quite
I'm
like that as
very
well.
like
aren't
that
you?
too.
Yeah.
I totally.
If you want something,
that
why
resonates
not?
with me.
Yeah,
I'm just
there's
like,
no limitations. There's no.
and what I love about that as well is that you don't have yourself in a category of
No.
the base. And again, you're not looking in that rear mirror.
No.
You're not going, that was my background, so I'm not the kind of person who would ever ask for that.
Yeah,
You look at everybody as equal.
yeah, absolutely.
And I love that too, because
Yeah.
I do that too. So it's like you could talk to the head of
You're
service
just a
and
man.
say, this is what we want.
Yeah.
Can we get it done? Who's in charge? Boom, boom,
Yeah,
boom.
you're just a man. I'm just a
Yeah,
man. You're
that's
just a
it,
woman,
that's
and
it.
you've got this job, and I've got this job, and this group of people want this.
Yeah.
Can we do it?
Yeah,
If we
it's
can't,
so
then that's fine.
refreshing.
You know, but
Because it enables you to be a mouthpiece for people who might not
Yeah.
have the ability or the leverage to be able to do it.
yeah,
It's great to have it, and
No,
especially when
absolutely.
you've worked your way to that space. You know what it's like when you're down there
yeah.
and you have no voice.
I think
And I think it's important to have people like that.
no, I do as well. Yeah, really important. I am that now, but in a different way. You know, I've kind
Absolutely.
of, but I will come on to that. But yeah, what was great as well was being that lead professional.
Yeah.
You know, growing in confidence as a
Yeah.
practitioner. You know, understanding the area. I had the qualifications. I understood the technicalities and the diagnosis and the conditions and the medical model of disability and all that stuff. But this gave me that grounding as I was working with families. I was
Real
on the
life.
coalface. I was working with families that disability was affecting both positively and negatively, you know, and really challenging situations, you know, and them coming to terms with that disability and understanding what support they could get and working with other professionals to get that support, escalating things for them, you know, and stuff like that. So being that real
So
advocate.
rewarding, I'd
Yeah,
imagine.
really varied
So
as well.
Rewarding, yeah.
Lots of different disabilities,
Exciting.
lots of different families from different, you know, economic backgrounds as well. You know, Warrington's a funny place. It's, you know, it's got some
Real
of the most
mix.
affluent areas in the country and some of the most deprived. So having that real mixture of the families that I was working with. But I think what came through for me there as a practitioner was those people skills.
Yeah,
Being able
again.
to talk to anybody on any level.
There's
you know,
your
that-
class clown from
Well, exactly. Yeah.
coming back up
Yeah.
again, isn't it?
Well, that's
That-
through like
that kid
travel
who
and through
kept you-
meeting people
yeah.
and through socialising and all
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
What a skill.
Yeah, and that, you know, I got quite good at that, but then got to the point where I was always thinking, oh, right, okay, I've done this for a little bit now. I've done it. I did it for 2.5 years, so it wasn't like a fleeting thing. And you know, I've got one of my best friends, Robbie, used to say to me, you know, the Stereophonics song.
Yeah.
I'm not looking. I'm just looking. I'm not buying.
Oh, yes.
He
yeah,
said
yeah.
that was my kind of theme tune growing up because I never stuck to anything. I was off going here, there, and everywhere.
I think that's a
But-
superpower in a way, though,
In a
don't
way,
you?
yeah. But I'd stuck to my degree.
Yeah, you
You
did.
know, obviously, you know,
Yeah.
I'd then stuck to a job in you know, related to that for 2.5 years.
Yeah.
But I was starting to get itchy feet a little bit. I
Bit
felt
restless.
like I'd exhausted it. I'd done it, you know, and I was, you know, and I wanted something, a bit of a challenge. So this job was advertised for a safeguarding officer in Warrington Borough Council, again in the council, and spoke again. Went to the woman Emma, who was managing the team at the time, and had a conversation about the role. What was it? What did it incorporate? You know, what did it mean? You know, what was she looking for? I was very good at that type of thing where I'd go and have those conversations. I'd figure out myself whether I was starting to do that a bit more. Is this a good move for me?
Yes, that's the good fit for you. 'Cause
Yeah,
a lot of
yeah.
people don't do that. They're just desperate for whatever's there.
Yeah.
So it's
yeah.
really good.
And actually, you're interviewing them.
That's what I always used
At
to
the
say
same-
to people.
Yeah.
They'd be lucky to have you.
Yeah. So so she said, it was this role where, the local authority was supporting schools from a safeguarding point of view. It's an education safeguarding role. So quite often you were the mediator between social care and schools. You were looking at things like, there was an advice line, so schools would ring up and ask for advice in
So
certain
you'd be
situations.
at the end of the line.
I'd be at the end of the line. Part of the role as well going forward would be to go out and audit schools around their practice around safeguarding.
Great.
Again, nothing that I'd ever done before.
Yeah.
Had this conversation with her, went for the interview. It sounded like a massive role. And probably part of me was thinking, I'm going to try go for this, but I don't think I'm going to get it. Went for the interview in the town hall in Warrington. It was a bit more grander than I'm used to than my usual interviews. And I got the job.
Amazing.
Yeah, I got the job, and I think what she said at the time was like the passion that you had, your transferable skills, the passion that you had for working with families, the work that you did with professionals, the barriers that you broke down and things like that. She said that they were the types of things that were. But I remember still at the time just having that. I was really excited because it was a decent jump in salary, a good kind of $6,000 or something like that, which is a lot.
It's a lot, a huge lot.
A lot then, So moving away from becoming a support worker and a practitioner to a safeguarding officer. Yeah. I remember having that imposter syndrome.
Of course.
And thinking, it's like when you go for any job, isn't it? You think that's where you want to go in the direction that you want to go in.
Yeah.
And when you've got it, it's like,
it's
shit.
fake it till you make it.
Fake it till you make it, yeah. Which, as you learn when you get older, that's what people do.
Everyone's
in lots
doing
of
it.
fields. Yeah, everyone's doing
Life
it. We're all
is
actors, aren't we?
performative.
Yeah, we're all actors in certain situations.
It's so relieving when you find that out. You're like,
Yeah.
brilliant.
Yeah,
Carry. I say that to students all the time when I work with teenagers.
yeah. No, you do.
Even fake it till you make it when you're doing revising for your exams.
Absolutely.
I hate this subject. Doesn't matter. Just pretend you like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes it does work.
Yeah.
It really does.
No,
So that's
it's
amazing.
yeah, and I worked in that team for 5 years.
Yeah.
But my manager actually quite quickly, she went off she was on a placement for a couple of days for a university placement to do I think she was doing a social work degree.
Yeah.
So I was kind of left
Holding the fort.
holding the fort.
Yeah.
And I remember when that
Wow.
phone used to ring, and
Yeah.
you're talking about senior people ringing me as well,
Yeah,
head
of
teachers,
course, yeah.
designated safeguarding
Yeah.
needs. They're ringing me for advice on safeguarding.
Whoa.
And I'm like, this is, I
Yeah.
remember dreading the phone
I
ringing
gotta
in
get
the
this
first,
right.
dreading it, and I learned quite quickly, I don't know where that came from, but from a resilience point of
Yeah.
view and dealing with that situation, probably being a bit savvy and a bit streetwise, that actually I could, if I didn't have the information straight away, I could delay things. I could ask them, I'd tell them that I'd come back to them.
Absolutely.
And what I started to do is I started to develop almost kind of I don't know what the word is really, but
Like a strategy.
but strategies,
Yeah.
but then a whole kind of filing system
Yeah.
in my head of
Yeah.
situations and advice that I'd given,
Yeah.
almost like points of reference.
Yeah.
And I did the job for 5 years, so so I kind of got to a point where I was kind of
Well, that's it. You're building on your knowledge, aren't you?
building on your knowledge, building on your reputation.
And living it as well.
Yeah. So within that job, I worked with some fantastic schools. I worked with 88 safeguarding leads.
Whoa.
And I was the go-to person. And then as the team
The
expanded,
kingpin. That's,
well, yeah.
Really?
I was the go-to person. We had a good reputation with our
Yeah.
schools. Schools used to ring us in situations, and if you can imagine any, I've dealt with every single type of safeguarding incident you can think of.
Yeah.
Over those 5 years,
bet.
and it's very rare that something comes up now, and it surprises me
Yeah.
because I've got a point of reference.
All the time.
What did I do last time?
Yeah.
What did I do in this situation? What worked? What didn't work? What would I change? And I was mentioning that today in a meeting actually with a less experienced DSL that's just come into post.
A DSL stands for?
Designated safeguarding lead.
So that would be somebody in a school.
In a school, yeah.
Like a teacher who's
Yeah.
designated
Yeah.
to run that for the entire school.
Yeah,
Right, okay.
quite often they're
Yeah.
non-teaching these days,
Right.
but designated safeguarding leads are somebody that whose responsibility it is to look after safeguarding provision within
It's
the
a
school.
big responsibility.
Yeah, and it all sits within the Children's Act and
Yeah.
Section 175 of the Education Act.
There you go.
All that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a big learning curve, but amazing. What I was doing and the things that I was dealing with. really high level stuff as well, you know. And I was asked actually, what was great about that job, being in it for 5 years, was I wasn't just sat on the end of the phone. I started to go out and do audits and visits.
Did
but there was
you
nothing in
prompt
place.
that?
There was nothing in place. So I created
you
the systems,
Brilliant.
the documents, the processes.
Yeah.
We had to, permanent exclusions were given to our team as well. So I said, I'll do it.
Yeah.
So I learned about permanent exclusions from beginning to end, you know, from a process point of view.
So what do you mean by permanent exclusions for people who might not know?
So when a child's asked to leave a school.
Forever?
Yeah. So an expulsion, they used to call it.
Yes.
So when a child's, you know.
So they've been probably
expelled.
Suspended. They've been in.
Yeah.
You know, they've been maybe done a swap for a different school.
Well, no, I mean, there's two types of exclusions. There's only two types. So there's a one-off serious incident. So that's if a student hits a member of staff or say, for instance, brings a serious weapon in or drugs, something that's really serious with the intent to supply, life-threatening, that kind of thing. So that's a one-off serious incident. And then there's a thing called persistent disruptive behaviour. So that's when a child is persistently disruptive and you know, you should be able to see
You've tried every strategy and the school has tried the policies and exhausted everything.
But actually a school should be able to see that coming.
Yeah.
So if it's persistent and it's disruptive, you've seen a timeline of that happening.
There needs to be some kind of maybe intervention or external.
Yeah, so my job in that process was, again, really interesting, but knew nothing about it when I started. Yeah. My job was to support the family and the child. The child's going through a grieving process.
Yeah, of course.
And don't forget, that was me.
Yes,
I was one of those children.
Who better suited?
Yeah, and I used to share that as well. I used to share that where it was appropriate with those families.
And I bet that made such a difference, that empathy.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
rather than just being a suit coming in going, this is what's happening.
Absolutely.
This is what you have to do.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Share your story where it's appropriate.
So important.
If it's going to have power and you know, you could see the parents like looking at it and just say,
turning your pain into purpose.
Exactly. I was excluded. That was me. This is what I've done since. This is, you know, I've worked hard. Education's the way forward, all that kind of stuff. But again, working with them and working with schools around preventing exclusions as well. Schools are thinking about an exclusion, looking at a scenario and going, well, you could try this, you could try that. We could do a whole podcast on exclusions. You know, I might do actually. Yeah. Something that I want to do some more research on actually, and the impact of exclusions, which I'm doing now in my role, but we'll come on to that. But yeah, a really good role, and obviously understanding the legal aspect of it as well. So this was while I was doing the advice and the audits. I was doing exclusions. I got a role around looking after children missing education. So I was going out and doing visits and trying to get children in school. School refusers.
Right.
Again, I did that so I had kind of different roles within that 5 years. I went into the MASH team, which is the Multi-Agency Safeguarding Hub. That's an acronym, MASH.
Oh, great.
I was the education lead in there.
Yeah.
So I was working with the police and social workers at the real coalface of child protection.
And is that an actual place, or is that just...
Yeah, it's a place. It's an office.
Brilliant.
So local authorities started bringing professionals together that dealt with child protection so that they could share information easily. So I was the education lead in there.
That's great.
But every single opportunity that I was asked about was like, I'll do it. I want to do it. I want to make it my own. And there was nothing set up, so I set up all the systems and the processes.
You were just so hungry for it.
Yeah.
Almost like you were crusading.
Yes, yeah.
And does that hark back to your childhood, do you think? Is it like, I've got some control, I've got
definitely
a little bit of responsibility and power.
And I love the area of safeguarding because it's so challenging and so difficult. But the rewards,
the impact
the impact, and the fact that it doesn't sit still. You don't suddenly sit there and go safeguard. No, I've finished that now. Done now. Year on year, and I've done it for the last 15 years in this area. Year on year, it's what next, what next, what next, and I love that. It's that looking forward.
It's that looking forward, and it seems to me as well from a positive psychology perspective. It's what better.
Yeah.
Because it's not even what next. It's not the next challenge.
No.
Everything you seem to touch, you're improving, you're moulding, you're putting systems in place, so you're systemizing it so that when you move away from it, it's there, it's solid, and it's good.
Yeah.
And it can be inherited by whoever's coming
up. But I think when
you.
when you're creating systems and when you're trying to improve things and improve support for people, that's the foundation of what you do. That's why you do it. But there's lots of things that kind of chip into that. You know, there's lots of bureaucracy and politics and challenge. And
especially because it's public service as
well. Public service, you've got to navigate all of that stuff as well. Well, I've got this idea and I think this is right. But it's not just about your opinion, it's about working with others as well and
Yeah.
bringing them in. And
Yeah.
that's where that comes from, where
Yeah.
now I bring people in and,
Yeah.
you know, it's
Which
not
is
something...
why I'm here, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's not something
Yeah.
that you can do on your own.
No.
And I think when you realise that safeguarding is not something you can do in isolation,
Yeah.
you do it, it's a teamwork thing, it's a professionals thing, it's accessing people's systems and working with people that are...
It's all about collaboration.
Yeah, because you're not the expert in everything.
And it's great
You
to
know.
be able to delegate and know that.
Yes.
And have the humility to do that as well,
Absolutely,
Steve. Because a
absolutely.
lot of people might be, you know, coming from a different perspective, thinking,
Yeah.
well, I'm the expert, so I'm in here to do this. I'm going to, you know, parachute me in and I'll
Yeah.
solve the problem.
Yeah.
But the collab is important. And it harks back again to you as a young
Yeah.
boy being isolated.
Yes.
You didn't have any of this support network around you.
No.
So here you are creating almost like a community, a
Yeah.
family. You're using your social skills from, you know, being back here. It's such a superpower that
I think it's
that
probably
you gain from
validation
that.
as well, getting
Yeah.
positive feedback and positive,
Yeah.
oh, this is great, what you've done's great, and
Yeah.
that kind of pushes you forward, because
Course.
everybody needs that, don't they?
Everybody needs that.
I didn't get that as much when I was growing up, obviously, but it's not an excuse, you know. I've never been one of these and I've said to people before, you know, although that has happened to me, my approach is sometimes, so what? You know, worse things have happened to worse, you know, to people. But my focus is, you know, and I've gone from a support worker role to an officer, to a manager, to a, you know, obviously now I'm in a trust,
A lead
strategic,
Yeah.
you know. But I was doing a lot of strategic stuff then,
Yeah.
but I didn't really know it. But the great thing was I was given the kind, is it carte blanche?
Yes,
is that the
you
right
were.
word?
Yeah. The freedom.
I was given the freedom. I was trusted.
But this is a huge thing, Steve, because
Yeah.
that when we come to well-being,
Yeah.
when we come to feeling happy in work,
Yeah.
stress and burnout, we say burnout and we expect it to be like a huge big thing, but
Yeah.
burnout is essentially
Of course.
too much responsibility,
Yeah.
right, with a good skill set,
Yeah.
but without the agency.
Yes.
You see, and that happens a lot in education.
Yeah, of course
You know,
it does.
you get really a lot of
Yeah.
responsibility, very little agency.
Yeah.
And agency is like autonomy, being able
Yeah.
to make decisions. And it's not necessarily the fault of your managers or your line managers. It's a lot to do with the system.
Yeah.
Like you
No,
don't. So you were in a very good role there to do that.
I think what's interesting as well is when you reflect back, I think I even reflect positively on things. You know, like there was a lot of challenges in that job and in that role, but what comes to mind more than anything is what we achieved really, and the support that we gave and the feedback that we got, and we were really well respected. Myself, Rose, and Emma, and then Emma went away, and then she went to do something different, and then I felt like I should have been the manager, but it wasn't given to me, and I felt like I should have had that job. I mean, don't get me wrong, you know, Rose is a fantastic person, good manager, you know, not nothing about her, but I felt that I had
You've earned it now.
done enough.
You've earned your stripes.
But actually thinking back, maybe I hadn't. I wasn't given it for a reason. So like I said, I had a fantastic 5 years at Warrington. I looked after children missing education, and there was a Northwest group. And we used to meet every few months, quarterly meeting. So I was the Warrington representative for children missing education, set up loads of systems to improve that and working with attendance and all that stuff. But the chair of that meeting, who'd been doing it for like 20 years, was retiring. So we had a meeting and, you know, who wants to do it?
Why not?
So there I am, managing
course.
a child missing education strategy meeting for 40 different local authorities. And I'm the chair.
Wow.
But again, I approached it in the same way, where I went in there and I looked at how we did things.
Yeah.
Let's keep what works.
Yeah.
Let's talk to people, get their views, bring that in.
Yeah.
No point running ahead with things yourself if you think that's the right thing to do.
It's not top down, is it?
No, it's not.
Yeah.
Get their views, give them some ownership. It's a new kind of leadership, if you like, of the, you know, get yourself a good deputy as well.
Yes, very
Get yourself a
second
good
in
deputy.
command. Very
Because I knew I
important.
wasn't going to do it forever.
Yeah.
But it was that idea that actually, I'd like to do this. I think I could improve this.
Yeah.
And putting yourself forward, out of your comfort zone.
Again.
Don't get me wrong, you know, I speak to one of our DSLs in the school, we talk about confidence in delivering things and training and stuff. You still get that imposter syndrome and that bit of nerves when you're sat in a
that's
meeting and I think that comes probably from my upbringing. But because I've got so many positive things to anchor to, that confidence comes from being able to go into any situation now and look at how we can improve it. So that's just an example of me going,
Yeah, I'll go.
I'll do
Why
it.
not? Yeah.
I'll do it. And I did a good job for a year or so.
But you were also very good as a collaborator. So I think knowing that, what you could do anything now because you know that it's getting the team.
Yes.
And you're brilliant as a communicator, so you're good at getting people on board.
Yeah.
You get people on board.
Yeah.
And once you have people on board, that's half the battle, isn't it?
Yeah. And what was interesting for me as well is when I, from a kind of career point of view, when I went to when I was there and I was coming towards the end, I was looking for other things. A high school reached out to me and said, we're looking for somebody to come in and sort things out and be our DSL. What do you think? And I could have stayed at the local authority. I could have stayed in my comfort zone, but I thought, do you know what? I've spent the last 5 years working with DSLs. How great would it be to be somebody that is in that position to be a DSL, if you like?
So then you went into...
I went into the school,
the actual school.
And again, changed everything.
Yeah.
Went in there, created new processes, systems, changed the way children looked at safeguarding within that school. It was Penketh High School. And again, just kind of, changed it for the better.
So that's now on a school level.
Yes.
And is that what made you go into... Because I met you in the college. So was that the job that you had before?
I stayed at that school
college?
for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Found towards the end that things were being changed, and I felt that I'd kind of created a bit of a reputation for myself as a bit of a fixer.
Yeah.
I would go into places and develop systems and processes and look for gaps. That's what I was doing with my audits. I used to go into school when I worked for Warrington. I used to audit them on the practice and the processes. And what I knew was I picked up all the good practice. Yeah. Looked at all the practice that wasn't great. Obviously linked that in with government, requirements and things like that from a safeguarding point of view. And I knew quite quickly, and learned really over a few years of going into any place that I knew I could go into and kind of change things and improve things.
You had that confidence and that knowledge.
I mean, the college was something different. That was even bigger.
Yeah,
that was five buildings, 12,000 students. But again, I wanted to get that experience. I've been to local authority. I'd had my personal experience, worked at local authority, worked in schools. Now I wanted to go into a college and get that experience.
Get into the further education.
Further education, 16 plus.
Again, a full circle moment.
Yeah, full circle moment.
Because the college was really where you found your skill set, and that they nurtured you when you got your education. So you're going back to this now.
Yeah, no,
really important place to be.
I think for me it was more of a challenge that I liked. I wanted to go in there because I knew what was in place. I think they had a safeguarding officer and a couple of a mental health worker and 2 counsellors when I arrived. But what I did is I went in there and I put new systems in place, processes. I expanded the team, expanded a larger mental health team. Yeah. The counselling team got larger. What was fit for purpose for those students. But it was a massive job. I mean, it was huge.
Yeah, for one person.
Yeah, I was there for 3 years. Again, learnt so much about myself as a manager. I was a proper manager then. I was managing people.
You had a big team, had you?
Big team. I mean, I was managing in Penketh as well. I had a few people. But I ended up with I think 13 or 14 people when I left the college, starting off with 3 people. Wow. But again, I was constant with the senior leaders. We need more, we need this, we need that, we need this. Yeah. I was that person that was pushing it forward.
And you had autonomy there as well.
Autonomy, yeah. But things about there that, from a culture point of view, I wasn't, and I'm not going to sit here and kind of slag off different places, but I think there was some things about each place I was that I was like, that doesn't quite fit in with my ethos and how I think things should be, without naming any names or situations or anything like that, because that's not fair, because people can't. But I think there were things about the local authority, there were things about the school and things about the college that when I first went in there, I was very positive and made a lot of changes, made things for the better. But I suppose I didn't really feel like I was maybe getting the recognition that I deserved, and I maybe didn't feel respected enough, not disrespected, but maybe not respected enough for what we'd done. And I'm not taking the credit.
And the changes that you've made.
I'm not taking the credit myself.
The team was making,
The team was making and what they were doing.
Yeah.
There was a few things that happened and stuff, but then obviously I started to reach out then, and that's where I am now. I reached out to somebody that I'd met in Warrington, actually, a head teacher, Shane, who was at King's Leadership in Warrington when I was doing my audits and supporting schools. So
you were working with him?
I wasn't working...
Like a partnership?
Yeah, from a local authority to school point of view.
Yeah.
So I reached out to a few people and said, are there any opportunities? And he said, funny you should say that. It came back to me quite quickly. We've got this opportunity at King's Liverpool, in the Dingle. So I went there again as the DSL. Yeah. Went in again and looked at the processes, the systems. Yeah. Turned it around with the new SLT and the new head teacher within a term. We got kind of good Ofsted. And then the kind of plan really was for me to always have that kind of trust role.
For the whole
for safeguarding, yeah.
So as far as the trust is concerned, how big is the trust? How many schools?
The Great Schools Trust, we've got 8 schools at the minute.
Okay.
When I first started, we had 4, so we're an expanding, growing trust.
Wow, so that was 3 years ago, wasn't it?
2 years ago.
2 years ago.
Yeah. So we're expanding, we're getting bigger. And what I love about the trust, and this fits in with my ethos and my background, is what I love about the trust is the ethos is that what they tend to do is they tend to look at schools that are perhaps struggling in challenging communities, and they instill within those schools that idea that it doesn't matter what background you come from, and it's just me
100%.
What background you come from, if you're willing to work hard, you've got a good work ethic, you've got a good moral code, they try and instill that and instill that, it's King's Leadership Academy, so they try and create leaders for the future.
Love it.
And it really fit in with my, the way they go about things and the way that they support schools. They've got they're not one of these trusts that goes in and just has that blanket approach to education and to pastoral support. They understand that schools are in their own communities and schools are individual schools, so they don't take that away.
It's not one size fits all.
It's not a one size fits all, which really fit in with my ethos. I was talking about some of the things I didn't like with what I'd seen in the past. Really fits in with my ethos.
And I love about the King's Leadership kind of academies, from what I've seen, is Aspire.
Yes.
Aspire is the mantra, isn't it? ASPIRE.
Yeah.
And they use that acronym.
Yeah.
And when you go in, that's the first thing I clocked when I went in. I thought, I like this.
Yeah.
I like this. Because you're raising aspirations.
Of course you are.
And with that, the science of that,
yeah.
when you see words like aspire around, the environment, you activate part of your brain called the reticular activating system.
Okay, the science part.
So the kids are going around, the teachers are going around, they're seeing the word aspire, they're seeing the mantras and all the acronyms that go, with it, achievement.
Yeah.
I can't remember what the breakdown is exactly, but they see that and they might not even realise it, but subliminally it's going in.
Yeah.
And the more with the reticular activating system, it's like the bouncer of the brain.
Yeah.
So they're going, we're going to look for the good stuff, the stuff that raises us, that's going to go in subliminally.
No, absolutely.
It's very clever.
Absolutely.
It's brilliant to see.
No, it is. And you know what? They're a fantastic trust. And
yeah.
even, like this podcast, I went to them with an idea.
Yes.
And I went to Shane and Katie Sharp, who's one of the directors of education. I said, I've had this idea for a little while.
Yeah.
And I discussed it in the college, but it was never picked up. And they were like, sounds amazing. Yeah. Go and do it.
Yeah.
I was like, what about this and what?
Yeah, just do it.
Just go and do it.
And obviously you had that freedom as well, because you can invite people like me to come and work with you and partnership with you.
Yeah, yeah.
So you knew me from the college.
Yes.
So you were able to say, come in and do some resilience work and support the stuff.
And what you do is you pick up people along the way.
Yeah.
And you think, would our students benefit from this person?
This is it.
And now obviously the work that you do, we'll speak about in the podcast, is really vital. Yeah. And student well-being and stuff. But yeah, I mean, I can't thank the trust enough, really, and they are really good to the word as well. Yeah. With schools, with children, with staff, with me personally. Yeah. I went into King's for a couple of years, absolutely loved it. Some fantastic staff, great head teacher. Great kids.
Who's won an award recently?
Just won an award. The school are winning awards left, right, and centre. But all the schools in the trust are like that.
They're smashing it.
They're smashing it. They're all good Ofsted and. I mean, Ofsted is obviously great, but it's not the be-all and end-all.
No, but personal development is doing really well, I've noticed, in the schools that I work with, because I partner with Phoenix as well, and it's incredible to see.
And it's exciting as well.
It's very exciting.
We've got a new school called Wavertree opening, and I've never been part of...
Yes, that's right, yeah.
I've never been part of setting up the safeguarding processes and systems in a new build.
So you've done that from scratch?
we're doing it now. We're in the middle of it now. So my role is that, you know, I'm the trust lead. I start full time in September, so I'm the trust lead for safeguarding.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Yeah, but
and well deserved.
Kind of,
well deserved, and you'll do a smashing job.
Yeah, no, it's you know, and it's something I'm really looking forward to. But what I would say as well is none of this. I don't think any of what you do in your career, and you'll be able to relate to this, what you do in your career and what you do, you know, and obviously I've been with my wife, Kel, for 10 years. We've been married for 3. You don't do any of that stuff in your job, in your role, unless you've got that solid background, that solid foundation.
Yeah.
And I think just again to come full circle, I wouldn't, everyone knows how I started off.
Yeah.
And how I'm not finishing, but what my life
where you
looks
are
like now.
Yeah.
You know, I've got an amazing wife, and I really get on with her family and a wider family as well.
Yeah.
I've got that kind of solid foundation. My son, who's just doing his GCSEs, you know, when I think about me when I was 16, leaving home and being homeless, and he's just done all his GCSEs. He's a fantastic runner, one of the best in the country for his age, by the way. He's just so disciplined and so. But obviously me, his mum and our families have instilled that in him. So we've done our job. I mean, it's not over yet.
Yeah, no.
But thinking about me at his age and what I went through and what I experienced, and him now,
and how
that's all down to,
you
know, and I live in a loving environment. My wife, you know, she just looks after me. She takes care of. I take care of her. Yeah. You know, and everything's great, you know, and career-wise, it's heading in that direction. And
you're flourishing, would you say?
Flourishing, yeah.
So when we spoke about, you know, the psychology at the beginning with the flourishing and surviving, you were suboptimal really at the start. I mean, you were barely...
Suboptimal, did you say?
Yeah, you were very much below weren't you?
Yes.
You were barely surviving.
Yeah.
And there was times when you weren't having your basic needs met.
Yeah.
Now you've gone from there. We mentioned in the previous episode, Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Is it self-actualization?
Self-actualization, right at the top, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that everything's great all the time and you're going around with jazz hands.
Challenges, of course there is.
But it means that whatever it is, you know, you are able to meet those challenges and embrace them.
Yes.
But not just that, Steve. I said this before, you're reaching back to help those behind you.
Yeah.
You're shining a light.
Yeah.
You're like a lighthouse.
Yeah.
You know,
it's interesting,
shining that light to help
I've
those
got a different role
coming
now,
up.
whereas I've been that person that's been doing the supportive actions, if you like, you know, working really directly with the kids, and I will miss that when I go fully trust-wide in September. But I will have exposure. I'm more the person that now is supporting the person that deals with that, if you know what I mean.
Brilliant.
But I've done all of that stuff as well myself.
So you can help.
But I love getting back in there and, you know, I meet with kids when I go to the schools and stuff like that. But that kind of direct work I do miss. But what I have to accept is I've kind of gone up the ladder, I suppose, how some would describe it, and I've got that key kind of strategic role now, you know, within the trust.
But with that, you can impart so much good.
Of course.
Look at that good. Look at the ripple effect of that.
Yes, and some of the stuff we're doing now, and the plans for the future, and you know what we want to do with the trust.
It's very exciting.
The podcast, you know, the newsletter, the app.
The newsletter's brilliant. Yeah, all of it.
And I am like that though. I am constantly what's next, and when I go into this trust role full time. It'll be what's next. It's just
But that's why you're ideal for that role.
I think I thrive on it. I think I like a bit of discomfort that comes with all that stuff to do, and you know, and I think at the end of it we'll create something better.
Yeah, because nothing necessarily good comes of comfort. Remember, the magic happens outside the comfort zone.
It does, yeah.
So just remember that.
Yeah.
I think this is we've come to a natural end.
Yeah.
You know, with that. That little maxim, the magic happens outside the comfort zone, can be applied to anybody working in any role, but also to students who might be listening as well.
Yeah.
You know, when they have to get their head down to do a little bit of work, finding it a bit hard.
And I think for me, you know, if I was to give a little bit of advice to anybody watching this, another young person or a family member or some, you know, anybody really that's watching it, is just persevere. You know, you're not going to get anything given to you. Mm-hmm. Some people are lucky enough to get things given to them, but for those that are not, hard work, if you've got a good work ethic, education, doesn't matter what that is. It doesn't have to be a degree. It can be a small course or read a book or, you know, watch something, a podcast. Don't do that as a one-off. Consistently do it, you know. And I got addicted to the education system in the end.
It's a good addiction to have.
Having been, you know, really struggled in it the first 15 years, really struggled. But I knew that it was going to it would take me somewhere where I wanted to go. So education is key.
Yeah.
Honestly, it is. And I'm living proof of that. But just because I've had this particular journey doesn't mean that you have to have the same journey.
Yeah.
It might be slightly different. You might achieve more, you might achieve less. You know, you might achieve just something different, but just keep going and keep talking to people and keep communicating.
Communication
and get the
key.
support that you need if you need it. You know, and that's the idea of this podcast as well, isn't it?
Yeah, using
educating,
for that.
You know, and listening to people's stories and learning from it.
And that persistence, keep on keeping on, has always been a mantra of mine.
Absolutely.
And I think that that's a mantra you could write down everywhere, but keep on. And I haven't come this far to only come this far.
Exactly.
That's one to remember.
Yeah.
You know, because you haven't come this far to only come this far. I think it's onwards and upwards for you, Stephen Panter, to be honest. So, but thank you for sharing that. Your journey, your story is absolutely incredible, very moving. Yeah. But I love it because it's just the epitome of post-traumatic growth. You were doing it. Yeah. So and as an inspiration to so many others. Thank you for sharing.
Oh, well, thank you. And I'm sure we'll see you again in another podcast.
You will.
about another topic. You know, there's so many you could do, isn't there?
Yeah.
But no, thanks and thanks for you know, you actually kind of, you know, speaking to me was great because I got the kind of science bit as well, which you know that helps people to understand what that really means and applying it to a real life situation.
It's important, I think.
And
it's
thank you.
To demystify it as well, so it's not just academic stuff, but to make it so that people understand that they've got control.
Yeah, it's normal stuff.
Take the power back.
But no, thanks, and like I said, I have enjoyed, and I've got to the age where I'm really open about my history and my background, and
I think it's important that you are,
and actually proud as well.
Yeah,
you know, proud
and so you should be. Yeah, be proud.
Yeah. Oh well, thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
And we'll see you again next time.
See you next time.
So thanks very much, Liz, and like I said, I have really enjoyed it. And thanks for watching, everybody. We've got loads of good podcasts coming up in lots of different areas that you will find useful and supportive, and hopefully you'll be able to pass on to somebody else as well if you think that's supportive for them. So please like and subscribe, and obviously pass on, and we'll see you next time. Thanks very much. Bye-bye. Thanks everybody for listening to the Great in You podcast. We really appreciate your support. Please like, subscribe and share, and the podcast will be available on Spotify, YouTube and all other social media platforms. Thank you so much. See you next time.